Hi, my name is Evelyn Hart. I'm 28 years old and I'm here to share something I've never talked about before. What happened to me and my family is not a movie script, not a fiction. It's real. This story might sound unbelievable, but every word of it is true. It begins quietly with an ordinary day and ends in a way I still struggle to accept. I want to tell you a little glimpse, just a teaser. When I found a letter hidden under a floorboard in my late father's study, I never imagined it would shatter every truth I knew and force me into a dark world of betrayal, blood, and revenge. If you're thinking of skipping this, please don't, because the truth buried in this story is darker than anything you've seen, and it's only just beginning. So sit back, subscribe, like, and share if you want to support more real stories like this. This story is written and edited by Dark Lifeside Diaries. Day it all started was nothing unusual. I was late for work. My coffee machine had broken down again, and the weather outside was gray and indecisive, as if even the sky couldn't make up its mind whether to cry or not. My father, Gerald Hart, had passed away just 2 weeks before after a long battle with liver disease, and despite my complicated relationship with him, I had taken time off work to sort through the old family estate up in Vermont. The house on Stowe Hill was a lonely, eerie place surrounded by pine trees and fog that clung like secrets. I used to visit it as a child, but never stayed long. There was something about that house that made your skin crawl. My mother had died in that house when I was just 5. They said it was an accident. She fell down the stairs during a storm, but growing up I remembered screams in the dark and the way Dad used to lock the basement door. No one ever went down there, not even the cleaning lady. But I told myself I was overthinking. Too many horror movies, too much grief. That was until I started clearing out Dad's office, dust-coated. Every inch of the mahogany desk and most of the drawers held nothing but old tax files and aging photo albums. But when I knocked over a small porcelain clock, it shattered against the floor and revealed something beneath the thick, faded rug. Warped floorboard with fresh nails that didn't match the age of the others. My hands trembled as I pried it open. Inside was a small box, leather-bound, locked, and next to it a key. My heart was hammering. I don't know why, maybe because even then something inside me already knew this was going to change everything. Inside the box were old photographs, handwritten letters, and newspaper clippings. The first photo was of a woman, not my mother, but someone who looked disturbingly like me. On the back was scribbled, "Diney 1984. That's the year I was born. The letters were from a man named Franklin Harper, someone I had never heard of, addressed to my father, begging him to stop what you're doing before it's too late. As I dug deeper, I found a newspaper article that shook me. Local woman dies in house fire, husband missing. The woman's name? Evelyn Hart, my name, but the date? 1987. The entire story described the death of a woman and the disappearance of her husband. After allegations of child abuse surfaced, I read it 3 times before I could breathe again. My mother didn't die falling downstairs, she was burned, but in this article I was supposedly the one who died. It made no sense. I was alive. I had grown up in this house, hadn't I? Or had I? Panic clawed at my chest. I called my Aunt Meredith, Dad's estranged sister, who hadn't spoken to him in over a decade. She answered with a sigh. I knew one day you'd call. When I told her what I found, she went silent for a long moment before whispering, "You were never supposed to know, Evelyn." I pressed her, desperate, but all she said was, "Meet me at the cafe on Maple tomorrow. There are things you need to hear in person." I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the creaky bed of my old childhood room, surrounded by walls that suddenly felt like they were watching me. The next morning I arrived at the cafe early. Aunt Meredith walked in 20 minutes late, her face pale and aged beyond what I remembered. She slid into the booth, looked me in the eyes, and said words that would haunt me forever. "You're not Evelyn Hart." My world tilted. "What do you mean?" I whispered. "Your real name is Isabella Harper. You were taken when you were 3 years old. Your father, Gerald Hart, wasn't your father. He kidnapped you from your real parents and raised you here after murdering your biological mother in a house fire." My hands were ice. I thought she was lying, but she pulled out more documents, an old adoption report, never filed legally, a police case file marked closed, presumed dead, and a photo of me as a toddler in the arms of a woman who looked exactly like the woman in the photo I found under the floor. The woman on the back labeled Diana, my real mother. Why would he do this? I choked. "Obsession." Meredith said, "Your mother rejected him. She chose Franklin. Gerald couldn't stand that, so he took you, set the house on fire, and disappeared. No one could trace him. He changed names, states, even forged a fake birth certificate for you." Rage burned like acid in my stomach. My whole life had been a lie. My mother didn't die in an accident. She was murdered, and my real father Franklin Harper was out there somewhere alone mourning, thinking his daughter was gone forever. My blood boiled. I knew what I had to do that night. I went back to the house, dug up every document, every piece of evidence. I created a file and called a private investigator. His name was Mason Cole. I told him everything and handed him the file. Within a week, he found Franklin living in a remote town in Oregon, under the radar, broken and grieving. He was hesitant to meet me, understandably, but once he finally saw me, he broke down in tears. "You have your mother's eyes," he said, voice cracking. We talked for hours. He told me everything about Diana, about the fire, about the years he spent in court trying to prove Gerald Hart had done it. But with no body and no baby, the police had nothing. I made him a promise that night I would get justice, not just for Diana, for him, for me. And to do that, I had to return to Stowe Hill. I had to uncover every dark corner of that cursed house, because I believed Gerald Hart left more behind, and I was right behind a painting in his study. Was a safe the code? My birth year, 1984, inside was a VHS tape. I had to hunt down an old player at a thrift store just to watch it. The footage was grainy, distorted, but clear enough. It showed my mother, Diana, tied to a chair, pleading for her life. Gerald stood over her, ranting about betrayal, about how she ruined him. Then came the fire. He filmed the whole thing. My stomach turned. I wanted to scream, cry, kill. I copied the tape, sent it to Mason. Together we took it to the state police. A cold case reopened. News outlets caught wind. The Hart family name went up in flames. The truth came out, front page headlines. Daughter reunites with father after uncovering 40-year-old kidnapping and murder case. But for me it wasn't enough. Gerald was dead. He got to escape. That's when I found a letter addressed to me. His final words: "I know one day you'll hate me, but I loved you the only way. I knew how I saved you from a world that never wanted you. It made me sick. He stole me, lied to me, killed my mother. He didn't save me, he destroyed me. That's when I made the decision to destroy every last remnant of him, burn the house, wipe his legacy clean." But just as I lit the match, something unexpected happened, and that's where the real nightmare began. The second the flame touched the gasoline-soaked curtains, the room lit up in an angry orange blaze. But instead of feeling liberated, I felt paralyzed, as if the house was watching me, unwilling to go down quietly. The heat surged, smoke crawled up the wallpaper like grasping fingers, and just as I turned to leave, I heard it, a thud upstairs. My heart stopped. The house had been empty for weeks, locked down since the investigation started. I had the only key. I told myself it was nothing, maybe a beam collapsing. But then came footsteps, slow and deliberate, moving across the floor above. My throat tightened as I turned back toward the hallway, fire growing behind me, shadows dancing. I should have run. I should have let it burn. But something made me climb those stairs, rage, instinct, or maybe the part of me still needing answers. When I reached the landing, the hallway was thick with smoke and heat, but the door to my old bedroom was ajar. I pushed it open, slowly, heart racing, and there, standing by the broken window, was a man I'd never seen before. Gaunt face, hollow eyes, holding a photo of me as a child. "You're her," he said, voice cracked like dry wood. "You're the girl from the fire." I couldn't breathe. "Who are you?" I demanded, stepping back. He looked at me with something between sorrow and fear. "I'm his brother, Malcolm Hart." My blood turned to ice. He told me if anything ever happened, I'd know when it was time, when she came back, when Evelyn walked through fire. I stared at him in disbelief. "He's dead." Malcolm nodded. "And he left me something for you." He reached into his coat pocket and handed me a worn envelope sealed with wax. Before I could ask more, the window behind him shattered from the heat and smoke surged in. He vanished into it like a ghost. I stumbled down the stairs, coughing, flames licking the ceiling. I barely made it out before the second-story windows exploded. Standing in the grass, watching the house collapse into itself, I realized he wasn't just waiting. He had been watching, maybe for years. Back at my hotel, hands still shaking, I opened the envelope. Inside was a single page, handwritten in that same cold, perfect script I had come to recognize. "If you found this, it means the truth is still hungry. I lied to you, but not everything was false. Diana wasn't innocent, and neither is Franklin." My hands trembled. "You need to find the basement key. The truth is buried with your real past, but be warned, some graves are sealed for a reason." Enclosed was an old map of the house, drawn decades ago, with a secret passage marked beneath the dining room. I had never seen a basement door there, but now the house was gone, or so I thought. Mason helped me track down blueprints at the town records office. They confirmed it. There had been a lower level sealed off and not listed in any official file, but it went deeper than that. The house was built in 1946 by a man named Reginald Harper, Franklin's father, and in 1957 there Was the murder there? His wife Elizabeth was found dead in that same basement, her throat slit, and the case was ruled a suicide. That's when I realized this wasn't just about Gerald, this wasn't just about me. This is about the Harper bloodline. I confronted Franklin at first. He denied knowing anything, but when I showed him the blueprints, he broke down. Your mother, Diana. She wasn't the first to die because of that house. My mother, she was the first. His voice was full of pain. My father killed her, covered it up, said she went mad, but I knew I heard the fight, I saw the blood. He told me Gerald had discovered the truth back then, and that's how they first met, two boys bound by blood and secrets Gerald blackmailed. Reginald took photos, kept records. Over time he became obsessed with Diana, Franklin's fiancée. He said she was the one pure thing in a cursed family. When she married Franklin, Gerald snapped. He didn't just take you to hurt me, Franklin said, eyes wet. He believed he was saving you from the same fate that your blood carried a curse. I didn't know what to believe anymore. But something was clear, this wasn't over. The basement might have burned, but I needed to see it with my own eyes. Mason and I returned to the ruins of the house 2 days later, digging beneath the scorched remains of the dining room. And there it was, a metal hatch, half melted, buried under ash and debris. We pried it open. The air below smelled of rot and damp stone. With flashlights and masks, we climbed down the rusted ladder into darkness. The basement was intact, somehow untouched by the fire. The walls were concrete, lined with shelves, old tools, jars of things I don't want to describe. In the far corner behind a steel grate was a locked room. On the wall was a name carved in jagged letters. Dinah. My knees buckled. We forced the door open. Inside was a bed, shackles, a camera. Mason turned pale. This wasn't just a killing, it was torture, prolonged, documented. And then we found it, a box of tapes, dozens of them labeled with dates and initials. And at the bottom one marked EA. I swallowed hard. Isabella Harper, me. We took the box and ran back at the hotel. We played the tape. What we saw shattered me. A small girl, me, crying in a dark room. Gerald's voice behind the camera whispering things I can't repeat. It wasn't just murder. It wasn't just kidnapping. It was a legacy of horror passed down through generations. Each man worse than the last. I felt sick, hollow, like I was made of lies. That night I couldn't sleep. I took the tapes and drove to the state police myself. This time they couldn't look away. Headlines exploded. Horror basement discovered. At Vermont estate links to 40-year murder spree. Franklin disappeared the day after. Left a note. I'm sorry, there are more things you don't know. Mason and I tried to trace him, but he was gone. Then the letter came, no return address. Inside, a photo of a cabin in Montana on the back. The beginning is the end. I booked a flight. Mason begged me not to go alone, but I needed answers. When I arrived, the cabin was empty except for a journal. It belonged to Diana, her real diary. Hidden for decades, she wrote of fear of Reginald's violence, of Franklin's complicity. She believed they were part of something older, a cult maybe. Something that started generations before. Something about the hollow tree, the name appeared over and over in symbols and drawings, and then I found the final entry. If Isabella ever finds this, run before they find you. Before the hollow tree wakes again. I stared at the last page, heart pounding, and then came a knock at the door. Wasn't alone. I froze at the knock, heart hammering, every instinct screaming at me not to move, but my legs carried me to the door like I was sleepwalking through a nightmare. And when I opened it, a woman stood there, tall, with jet black hair tied back in a severe braid, wearing a coat that looked older than she was, and in her hand she held the same map I'd found in the box under the floorboard back at the Stowe Hill house. She studied me with eyes like polished obsidian and said, "You shouldn't be here, Isabella," using my real name like a warning, like a curse. And before I could respond, she pushed past me into the cabin, locked the door behind us, and drew the curtains. With sharp movements, her every motion efficient and eerily silent, until the place felt sealed off from the world. "Who are you?" I finally asked, trying to hide the tremble in my voice, and she turned slowly, reached into her pocket, and handed me a faded ID badge. Department of Justice, Cold Case Division. Name, Agent Lillian Crow. Badge number etched in warm metal, and she said, "I've been chasing the hollow tree for 17 years. You just stirred a wasp nest that's been dormant since before your mother was born." I didn't understand. Was this really a cult? A bloodline? A curse? She explained that the hollow tree was a coding name used in a buried file within the DOJ. Operation Arbor, a secret investigation into ritualistic killings tied to a network of families in the Northeast stretching back to the 1800s, all connected through marriage, business, and something far darker, ritual inheritance, she called it. And when I asked what that meant, she pulled out an old photograph, yellowed at the edges, showing a group of men standing around a tree with a hollow trunk, a child bound at its base, and in the center stood Reginald Harper, my grandfather younger, smiling, holding something in his hand that I could only identify as a ceremonial dagger with a serpent carved into the hilt. Lillian told me that Dinah had tried to run after discovering that Franklin had been groomed by his father to become the next vessel in the transference ritual, a process supposedly transferring the sins or legacy of power from one generation to the next by sacrificing what the patriarch loved most, and in Reginald's case that had been his wife Elizabeth. In Franklin's case, it was me. My head spun. It sounded insane like horror folklore, but when she handed a new redacted FBI document showing an incident in 1990 where 3 children were found mutilated at the base of an old tree in Vermont, same tree from the photo, same tree etched in the diary pages, I stopped doubting because the reality was far worse than fiction. Dinah wasn't just running from your father, she said. She was trying to kill the tree and the cycle she died failing. Lillian had spent years tracking the surviving bloodlines. Some died mysteriously, others vanished. And now only a few remained, including me. That's when she dropped the real bombshell. Gerald hadn't kidnapped me to hurt Franklin. He'd taken me to protect me from the ritual Franklin had agreed to, and Dinah had uncovered it too late. I staggered. Back head pounding, memories flashing, Franklin crying, telling me he was sorry, the tape marked IH, the locked room with the shackles. What if he had planned to give me to the tree too? Had Gerald actually saved me despite his monstrous actions? My mind was fracturing under the weight of so many half-truths, but then Lillian dropped a final piece of evidence. A photo of Diana in a hospital gown taken 2 years after her supposed death. The timestamp read 1989. She didn't die in the fire, Lillian said. She was taken by the Arbor Circle. She was part of it. She tried to rebel, but they kept her until they didn't need her anymore. Everything I knew was Ash. My mother wasn't innocent. My father wasn't innocent. Gerald, the man I thought was my captor, might have been the only one who truly fought to keep me from the ritual. And yet he also tortured or kept me in the dark and raised me on lies. The ritual is coming again, Lillian whispered. Every 40 years on the blood month October, it begins with the return of the last daughter. That's you. My stomach turned. I looked at the journal again. The hollow tree wakes again. The prophecy wasn't metaphor. It was a plan, a cycle. One I had unknowingly walked back into. Lillian said we had only one shot to find the tree before they did and destroy its root system, a process that involved more than just chopping it down. The Arbor Circle believed the tree held the ancestral power of the family line. Its sap was used in old rituals. Its roots extended through the burial grounds of the original settlers who founded their bloodline with sacrifice. Franklin, wherever he was, would be preparing, and I was his key. We burn it all. I said we salt the earth. But first we needed help. Mason was the only one I trusted, and when I called him, he was already in Vermont chasing a lead he didn't know was connected. He'd found another box, this one buried beneath a gravestone marked with my name inside. Blueprints of the original Arbor Circle compound coordinates, and most chilling of all, a current photograph of me entering the Montana cabin. They were watching me. The circle was active, and they knew I was here that night. Lillian and I packed what we could, burned every trace of our presence, and met Mason in a motel on the border of Idaho. We pored over the blueprints. The compound was real. Located deep in the Catskills, hidden behind an abandoned lumber mill, dozens of underground rooms. One marked as the root chamber that was our target. We drove all night, avoiding main roads, switching cars. Lillian said if we were caught, we wouldn't be killed quickly. They needed the ritual intact. That meant they needed me alive until the final moment. The forest surrounding the mill was dense, almost unnatural, like nature had been manipulated, twisted. We reached the edge of the compound by dawn. Lillian scouted the perimeter while Mason and I stayed hidden in the trees. That's when I saw Franklin, older, goner, but undeniably him, walking with a cane and followed by 2 men in robes. He entered a stone building carved with the same tree symbol I'd seen a dozen times now. My blood ran cold. This was it. We go in tonight. Lillian whispered, if we fail, no one will ever hear your story. She handed me a small vial sap from the tree stolen decades ago. If you get caught, drink this. It'll slow your heart, fool them. I nodded, fear clawing at my insides. Night fell like a curtain. We moved fast, silent. Lillian disabled the cameras and Mason kept watch outside. I followed her down into the underground tunnels, torchlight flickering. The air was damp, the walls lined with carvings, families, children, sacrifices, all leading to a massive wooden door covered in wax seals. She placed her hand on it, whispered something in Latin, and the door creaked open. The root chamber was alive. At the center stood the tree, its hollow trunk pulsating like a living thing. Roots stretching across the room like veins. Around it were 7 figures in robes, and at the front. "Franklin, you returned," he said, voice calm. "The circle is complete." Lillian stepped forward, gun raised. "It ends now," but she was. Too late. The figures turned, revealing faces. I recognized town officials, a senator, even the sheriff who closed my case. The circle was everywhere, a trap. "You brought the last piece to us," Franklin said. "Just as we hoped." And then Lillian was shot point blank from behind. She fell without a sound. I screamed. Mason burst in, but they grabbed him too. I fought, kicked, bit, but they forced me to my knees before the tree. "You are the vessel," Franklin said, raising the dagger with the serpent hilt. "Through your blood the sins are past. Through your heart we cleanse ours." I closed my eyes, felt the blade touch my skin, and then blade kissed my skin, its edge cold and sharp, but before Franklin could press it deeper, the ground beneath us trembled, at first like a whisper, then a violent shudder that cracked through the chamber walls and knocked the robed figures off balance. And in that split second of chaos, I remembered the vial in my pocket, Lillian's last gift. And as Franklin gripped my chin and raised the blade to my throat, I bit the cork off the vial and swallowed the sap, bitter and burning as it slid down my throat, and everything slowed. My heartbeat dulled, my limbs grew heavy, and my body slumped, like I had passed out just as the ritual demanded. Franklin hesitated, eyes narrowing, unsure whether I was gone or playing him, and I could feel his breath as he leaned closer, whispering words I couldn't understand, maybe Latin, maybe madness, but then he nodded, satisfied, and stepped away, signaling to the circle to begin their chant, a low guttural hum that filled the chamber like a swarm of insects. And that's when Mason, God bless him, made his move. I heard the pop of a gunshot echo through the chamber, and one of the robed men dropped, blood spraying across the tree's roots, followed by a second, and then panic exploded, screams scrambling. The chant broke, and I seized my moment. Fueled by adrenaline, I sprang to my feet and lunged at Franklin, who had turned just enough to miss my fist until it connected with the side of his skull, sending him stumbling into the altar, where the knife clattered from his hand. Mason tackled another man and wrestled his weapon free while I grabbed the serpent-hilt dagger and turned it toward Franklin, whose face twisted, not in fear but awe. "You were always meant to finish it," he said, smiling like a prophet embracing death. "Blood to root, daughter to flame." I didn't give him the satisfaction. I drove the blade into his chest, feeling it slide past bone like it belonged there, and as he gasped his last breath, the hollow tree reacted. The roots thrashed the trunk, shrieked not with sound, but with a deep ancient vibration that split the stone under our feet, and Lillian's final plan came into focus. The chamber wasn't just a room, it was a trap. She planted charges throughout the tunnels, tied to the failsafe of the tree's pulse, and the moment Franklin died, it triggered the countdown. Mason and I ran, dodging falling debris as the walls collapsed and roots thrashed like tentacles trying to stop us. We climbed out through the entry shaft just as the first explosion rocked the compound. Fire and smoke erupted behind us, and in the red-orange glow, I looked back and saw the tree collapse inward like it was imploding, screaming in silence. And in that instant, the centuries-old curse, the blood-soaked cycle, the ritual that had stolen my entire life, ended. We drove away in silence, covered in ash, hearts pounding. No police, no headlines. The few survivors of the circle either buried in the blast or disappeared into the shadows. The story was too insane to tell the world, but Mason and I kept the evidence. Tapes, documents, DNA samples. We sent anonymous files to the FBI, knowing it might disappear into some vault, but at least it wouldn't be erased. 2 weeks later, I stood at Diana's real grave. Yes, we found it deep in the woods near the original Harper estate where Franklin had buried her after she tried to escape, and I placed the dagger at her headstone, then lit the earth on fire the way she'd written in her journal. Salt and flame, root and bone, no seed shall grow where sins are sown. And when the fire burned out, I finally felt peace. The Hart name, the Harper bloodline, the hollow tree, all gone. Mason and I left Vermont for good. He moved to Seattle. I went to Arizona. We kept in touch. He's the only person who truly knows me. Everyone else thinks I'm Evelyn Hart, the woman who lost her parents in a fire and survived trauma in silence. They'll never know Isabella Harper, the stolen daughter, the unwilling heir to a family curse, but I know who I am now, and I'll never forget. Some nights I still hear the tree in dreams, in thunder and silence, but I don't fear it anymore because I ended it, me, not because I was chosen. Not because I was special, but because I survived long enough to burn the roots of evil to the ground. To anyone else who finds themselves bound to bloodlines they didn't ask for, fight back, light the match, bury the name, and never let the past grow roots again. This was my story, and now it's yours. Thanks for listening to my story. If you stayed with me until the end, I appreciate you more than you know. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more true dark family stories. This story was written and edited by Dark Lifeside Diaries.